Welcome back to Purpose Project. I'm your host, Leslie Pagel, and this season we're exploring what it means to live the beat of our own drum. In today's episode, I sit down with Nicholas Lawrence, who had spent many years of his life dreaming about thru-hiking the Appalachian Trail. Eventually, he made the decision to step away from a white-collar career to do just that. This is a conversation about moving beyond excuses, about taking small steps. It's a conversation about what it takes to finally do the thing that's been on your heart for a very long time. Let's take a listen. Nicholas, thank you for joining me on Purpose Project. I am really looking forward to diving into your story.
It's one of my favorite topics to talk about here, the Appalachian Trail. Before we get started, I'd like to just rattle off when I say Appalachian Trail and when I say through hike, what I mean here. So if that's okay for our listeners, our viewers, I want to just share a overall perspective on a through hike and what that
Absolutely.
means. So in 2023, I did a northbound through hike of the Appalachian Trail, starting from Georgia and ending in Maine. The Appalachian Trail is the longest pedestrian-only footpath in the world. The 2023 distance was 2,198.4 miles, crossing 14 states, 6 units of national parks, and about 80 or so state-controlled areas as well. Most familiar, it passed through the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee and North Carolina, as well as the Shenandoahs in Virginia. Around 4,000 or more people will try to hike the Appalachian Trail, through hike the Appalachian Trail every year. Only about 20% will finish, and we'll get into more details about that. There are lots of approaches to hiking as well. Most will start between March and April of a given year and start south in Georgia and head north to Maine. That's the most common approach, but many will do it flip-flopping, starting in the middle, going up, going back to the middle, going down. Some people will start from the north and head south, and a number of other approaches here. You carry about 4 to 5 days of food at a time, and your animals include bears, porcupines, raccoons, armadillos, rattlesnakes, rabbits, deer, mice, chipmunks, and many others. And I think last but not least, it is the greatest personal achievement of my life. And I think anyone who has completed a through hike will say the same. So that's just to set the stage for everyone watching and listening to get their head around what we're talking about on a through hike.
I love it. And just so they don't have to wait any longer, Nicholas did do the through hike. He's one of the 20% that made it all the way through, which is one of the many reasons why I've been looking forward to this conversation. Nicholas, when I first heard your story, I couldn't help but thinking about all those times in my own life where I thought, oh, I really want to do this. I really want to do this, but, and insert excuse.
Yeah.
And you were explaining to me how this through hike was one of the things you always wanted to do, and then you did it. So would love to kind of take you back to that time of your life and peel back that onion a little bit in terms of how did you not let all those excuses get in the way? Did you have excuses? We'll get to all the questions, but let's first start with Nicholas making the decision to do the through hike. What was going through your mind? How did you decide?
There was always a reason to say no. I had this in my head from as early as about 2012 or so. So more than a decade, right? 11 years later, I actually do the trail. And that 11 years was filled with, I'm a compliance director in my career. Okay. That is complete 180 from living your life out of a backpack, right? So I was very, and still am, very career oriented, right? And so I started my career out after graduating 2012, KPMG, got my CPA, joined the forensics practice, I'm thinking I'm going to work in this white collar environment, become a partner, work really hard, and just have all that, and it's just going to be cut and dry. And for a variety of reasons, I found myself as I grew and matured and realized there are a number of aspects about me that are craving at times the balance and the focus and the stability of something like compliance and white collar work and career path against the I've got to do different things. I have to experience as many smaller lives in my life as I possibly can. And there was always an itch to scratch there.
Mm.
And so the Appalachian Trail, I was born and raised in Vermont, actually about 20 minutes or so outside, mile 1700 or so on the Appalachian Trail. And we would go swim in the creek, if you will, at this part of the trail. And I remember when I was little seeing these hikers coming through and their beards are down to here and they got the huge pack on. And I just always wanted to do something like that. So it was rooted in my head.
Okay.
But as I grew and this itch grew as an adult, I got into my head, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. And even in 2012, 2013, bought the gear, started planning, read books, read several books about it. The list goes on. But then the excuses always came. I was passing professional certifications. I eventually moved out of New York City and over to Illinois. There is no Appalachian Trail or culture in Illinois. You're closer to some other major trails, but still, you're not in New York and
Right.
Vermont where these actual states have the trail in them. And the list went on. And then you really start getting into the responsibilities increase as you climb higher. The dollars, the stock options, the retirement, and all of those things just always came into play. So, personally, professionally, psychologically, or physically, there was always a reason not to do it or to put it off one more year.
Mm.
So, what were some of the pros, or how did I keep it top of mind? I mean, the first was just think about it, keep it, talk about it, keep it top of mind one year or another. Even if you have a long term goal and you're putting it off, talk to someone about it, read a book about it. Even just go on practice hikes. I walked on rail trails with a backpack full of books in Chicago because that was the only place that I had, but it was something better than nothing, even if it was an iota compared to what I actually needed to get on the trail. Talking to other people, just sit them down. We just have 5 minute coffee break. What do you want to do? What are you planning outside of your professional life? Well, I'm planning this. Wow, tell me about it. It's really interesting. I didn't know
Mm.
people could do that. And I would fuel myself with the excitement of talking about it. Last point here is what was the turning point? My partner, Catherine, she had known me since 2012, and she knew that I had been talking about it for a very long time. And 2023, really 2022 came around. I had a career change. I left my job in Illinois to join a very interesting startup. That startup was remote. And I realized, is startup culture going to be for me? And that's a career decision I was thinking about. And I'm talking to Catherine at the same time. And she says, well, look, if you realize startup culture isn't for you, you save some money, your current job is remote, so you can head back to the East Coast. Maybe it's time to stop talking about that hike and actually do it, right? And you get that moment where you realize the stars are never going to align, but is this good enough? And it was that objective from a third party awakening of,
Mm.
I think you might be right. This might be the right time.
Mm.
But hopefully that gives you some context about both fighting the battle of how not to do
Right.
it, but trying to counter. And then, of course, your kind of wake up moment as I think it's time.
Yeah. And what I heard there is that even though you were making excuses in air quotes, the excuse was never, I'm not going to do it. It was more of an excuse for now. I'm not going to do it now
Mhm.
because insert. But there was always something within you, the knowingness that you're going to do this at
Yeah.
some point in your life. It was
Hmm.
just when. And when you were going through those moments where it's not now, you were still preparing for when it would be.
It's a journey of realizing excuses and delays are natural as long as you know definitively, without a doubt, the conclusion is foregone. I will do this hike no matter what. So every excuse, every year that passed by, you're right, it hit a little bit less hard, or I took it a little less personally because I knew at the end of the day it was inevitable. Now, can I control everything? Of course not. Is there a little bit of psychological lying to myself? Yes, absolutely. But that is the strategy, by the way, you use to get through the hike as well. Is you got to lie to yourself a little bit and say it's going to happen. So you make that as definitive as possible. That conclusion is foregone. Your excuses, your delays, not only can you handle them a little bit better, but again, it feels almost natural as like zoom out. This is not
Mhm.
an immediate failure. This is a long-term speed bump.
Right.
And that mentality carried me all the way through the hike as well. But you are spot on with that.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing I heard was the tipping point was a sense of permission from someone close to you saying, "Do it."
You're absolutely right. Because remember, who are you surrounded with when you're working in these corporate positions? Other people who are working in corporate positions. There is no objective third party coming straight off the trail and into the office to say, hey, you got to try this other thing. You're surrounded by people who will enable you to
Mhm.
make excuses and enable you to delay because their interest, stock options and career advancement and new opportunities and resume building are all of those reasons why you would never leave on a through hike. And so you are surrounded by people who, although interested, excited, intrigued, in some cases concerned on safety things and whatnot when they hear about the hike, are not going to be the people who are going to say, like, you know what, it's time to do that, especially if you work for them. No. And so to have someone objectively say, why don't you stop talking about it and do it? Or
Mhm.
why don't you stop thinking you need more stock, more money, more career advancement, more titles, more whatever, and actually look at something that matters in a different way. And when you stay in your bubble of your work bubble, you're not going to
Mhm.
find that objectivity, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, well, and what I hear there is very much of we need to have people in our lives that serve multiple purposes. In our work world, we have the people that help us be motivated to do our job and happy to do our job and all that. But when we have this itch that's outside of the work world,
Yeah.
we need people in our lives that can help us understand that and help us scratch that itch.
The term poking the bear should be something that is in the minds of every loved one supporting someone who has an initiative or vision as wild as a through hike.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on with the hike? What did you do this year? Or I read an article about someone who did it recently. Have you seen it? I read a book, kind of this miniature version of immersing yourself into someone else's goal with the objective of keeping them honest about it
Mhm.
and bringing them up. Have you done anything for it in the last 6 months?
Mhm.
And my partner, she really went the extra mile, but not only did she serve as the objective catalyst, but she supported resupplies along the trail. She flew out to these really rural trail towns that you would never be taking vacations to just to meet me and spend a few days with me while I decompressed after being out in the wilds for many days at a time and going many days without seeing people and cars and the like. And so the degree to which a loved one will immerse themselves in your goal can be anything from point 1 to 100, but never zero.
Mhm.
Always prod in a thoughtful way
Yeah.
when you see someone's passion about a long term goal like this to help keep them honest a little bit.
Right. Poking the bear. And as you were describing that, I found myself thinking some relationships don't necessarily have that person that's poking the bear because of fear or worry or whatever. But for you, you were fortunate to have someone understand that this is a dream, a life, a passion, a purpose of yours, and not be intimidated, threatened by it, but instead actively involved in helping to make that happen for you.
And that means the world. It makes a world of difference when someone takes a vested interest in your success. And it goes with good managers as well as spouses, partners, best friends, and parents. It's all the same principle is I just want to hold on to a piece of your vision and your passion and be a part of it because in a way that gives the individual who's aiming for this goal and this vision a little bit more responsibility to say I'm not only accountable to myself but someone else has invested just a little bit of interest, time, and care into
Mhm.
me as well, and I have this sense of obligation to follow through with it both for me and for them.
I want to get to the hike, but
Yeah.
was that sense of responsibility held all the way through the hike?
Particularly it would build, if anything, because when I saw the number of flights and rental cars she would have to take to get down to Hot Springs, North
Oh,
Carolina, or Marion, Virginia, I always got an extra boost, not only just from the reprieve of relaxation and being able to see someone that I love and care about, but also from the sense of this is yet another contribution they've made to me. And so, as they help me, every resupply box I got, you switch
right.
boots out every 500 miles or so, right? A new pair of boots sent to me. And this was beyond my partner, my parents, my family also helping me to manage resupply. And you get these little things, you say, this is something that someone has continued to inject their efforts into my success. And in a way, that same obligation and accountability will keep you going because you want to say, thanks for doing this. I've used it.
Right.
It's fueled me, right? It's helped fill up my tank a little bit more, and it's 100 miles later, right? And it's a way of showing thank you by continuing to succeed and continuing to walk.
Yeah. So it is, I made this decision because of you, and now I'm doing it in part for you
Mhm,
too. How
mhm. It's
cool
a
is that?
it's the best way I can pay forward the efforts that
Mhm.
you're taking to help me along is
Yeah.
is is succeed for it.
So take us back to the day that you decided. You said, I'm doing this.
Mhm.
What did that day look like? Were you doing it the next day? Was it, I'm doing it this year? Take us through what happened.
It was, I would say, Q4 of 2022 came into fruition where I said, all right, I like where I work. I've enjoyed the experiences. But at the end of the day, I feel like I have turned this corner of I want my career to remain for the next several decades in large pharma and large companies and established areas. So I'm answering the first question, which is startup culture is not going to be where I want to be in the long term. And I've been able to see that in the last 10 or 11 months. And so when I made that first call, the second call came, which is it's time to do this hike. And that's where a flood of other questions came in, but you have to maintain sort of keep the door shut kind of thing because then it's all of okay, but what about after the hike and are you going to have enough money and what if you don't succeed and the list just goes on, but at the end of the day you have to start in piecemeal. And so the second answer, the second point was I'm doing this hike, it's going to happen, right? Let's focus just on planning these logistics for the hike. When am I going to do it? Is all my gear ready to go? What are resupply points going to look like? So I think it's just sort of make the second call and then prevent the flood of questions and try to not become overwhelmed with this decision. And that did take probably a couple days where I said yes to it. And then I just sort of had to process and calm myself down instead of trying to tackle everything at once.
So you said yes. You said I had this flood of feelings that were happening, and you were aware of that. And to me, I'm imagining that you're saying, okay, I'm aware of this. I need to just slow down and pause and breathe
Yep,
to
yep.
get through
Because remember, is this had been 10 years of talking about it and musing on it and reading books about it. That's all still theory.
it. Right.
Even now, I had done a practice hike. I had gone out on the trail, the portion in Vermont myself several times, and these other points of trying to make it as real as possible for me. But at the end of the day, when you turn the corner and say, okay, the flight is booked, right? I'm booking reservations at Amicalola Lodge where the trail or rather the approach trail starts, which we can get into. But making these things real, even like, how am I going to get a hiking pack on a plane? All these little things came into my mind, and those little nuances, they weren't in my books, they weren't in my musings. That was all just fun and excitement. And I was like, wow, okay, like the rubber's hitting the road. You tell yourself for so long, I know I'm going to do it, but then there's still that sort of second milestone of truly turning the corner and say it's real, and that still comes with a flood of feelings.
Right. So when you decided to do this hike, what were you hearing from other people?
One of the more fascinating pre-hike experiences as I look back on it now was talking with others about it. Remember, we are in white collar land here, so we're sitting in a conference room, we're looking at PowerPoint presentations, we're running data analytics here, and these personal points would come up sometimes about, what are you working on outside of work? What are your interests? That kind of thing. And the hike would come up. And I would explain it to people, and there would be a mix of intrigue, of interest, of concern, like I've said, and just overall, like question after question. I want to hear more about it, right? And particularly with senior people who, for all intents and purposes, have won the capitalism contest. They have the senior title, lots of responsibility, great stock options and bonus and money, and they're there. And as I would say this, talk about this hike, you could see with those people this kind of spark in
Mhm.
their eyes. And some would even say it out loud. They would say, I wish I had done that.
Yeah.
Or they would start talking about their own hike equivalent, what they wanted to do at a certain point, and they did it. And then that spark goes out, and they say, well, we should probably finish this PowerPoint deck, right? And those little moments for me were fuel in the tank for me to say, I don't ever want to have my spark go out. I don't want to ever have only a spark, and then it's extinguished by a regret because the time has gone by. There are things in your life that I think that accomplishments in corporate worlds may never, it's a thirst that those accomplishments may never quench. And so
Yeah.
when I had those experiences and I would see that light up, I said, I don't want to be someone who has their light still lighting up and it's too late to do anything about
Right.
it.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show. We're all human. And as a part of being human, there are things that we are interested in, that we're passionate about, that we want to go do. And then there's the excuse.
Mhm.
And hearing from someone that's not going to let the excuse get in their way, but really prioritize it and not let their sparkle dim
Yeah.
is why I wanted to tell this story.
Yeah.
Cool. So how long was it between deciding to do it and then day one?
It was, I would say, late September when I really made the call of like, it's going to happen. Now, I was a January start in
Oh,
Georgia. So
September
it
to
is not,
January.
now keep in mind, there had been practice hikes, there had been gear, there had been fitness. I was running regularly, regardless. So I was in this mode of trying to temper myself to say, let's get to maintenance mode to have the
Mhm.
fitness and things like that if you can. At the end of the day, this clicked, and I said, all right, I think it's time now. And so I said, let's flip from maintenance mode to action mode here. It's September. I want to start in January, and I did work. I worked all the way up until the last week before I left.
Wow.
And a part of that was practical, right? I wanted to continue learning as much as I could. I had projects going on. I wanted to finish them. I wanted to finish the year strong. And I was a compliance director on Friday, and I was unemployed hiker trash on Saturday. That was January 20th. I am wandering on the trail. So it
Wow.
really was night and day for me. But again, I did it in a measured, practical fashion.
Yeah.
Finished strong on the year. But at the end of the day, there couldn't have been a sharper transition than that moment right there between Friday and Saturday.
Yeah. During that period, September to January, did you notice if things were working in your favor? Like call it luck, call it the universe, any of that happening?
If anything, some of the mental hesitations took me in the other direction.
Mhm.
Particularly, I was in Vermont at this time, this September to January timeframe, and I remember going out at night, and it's 20 degrees. The wind is howling. Okay, the snow is falling, and it's pitch black, especially in a place in small towns in Vermont. You don't have street lamps, right? And I remember kind of standing on the porch and looking out into that and say, I'm going to be out there and there's going to be no house I'm going to walk back into. And every noise that I would hear, and every, you put your headlamp on, and the yellow eyes that are looking back at you, those are all going to be there, and I'm going to be out there with my house on my back and everything I can have on my back, and nobody and nothing. And you don't walk back into a nice warm house. So I had these moments that said, am I really going to do this? And there were a
Mm.
couple, admittedly, like impulse purchases to say, like, oh, actually, I know my sleeping bag is pretty good and it's pretty heavy and it's rated for the right weather, but like I might spend a little bit more and get a better one just to be sure. So you have a few hesitations there as to like, if anything, like, well, let me just plan a little bit more. I'm a planner, and a lot of preparation there. So if anything, it was in that way. I would say though, one sort of fate point, luck point. I was on a practice hike in December, another one with a very experienced hiker, and I had a 20 degree bag with a liner in it that I felt was going to be the right fit for me. During that hike, the mice, there are lots of mice in Appalachian Trail shelters, which are nothing more than three-walled lean-to type structures, if you find a shelter at all. Mice got into my sleeping bag, and I woke up and there were feathers flying everywhere. The down
Mm.
had been pulled out. That is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous
Right.
situation to happen, because that's your primary source of warmth and you need to get off the trail immediately in cold weather. I ended up replacing it with a 0 degree bag, which ended up being the perfect bag for me, especially in the weather that I encountered. So, if anything, during some prep, I had some good luck, some bad luck followed by some good luck. And it just so happened an hour north in Vermont, actually in New York over the border, there was 0 degree sleeping bags, particularly a brand I was looking for, are very hard to find. They
Mm.
just had one in stock. I took the drive that same day and was able to find it and pick it up in person. Otherwise, it would have been a long time of shipping and things like that. And we were getting close to departure
Right.
time. So a couple fateful moments like that perhaps happen, but
Yeah.
mental
Mhm.
obstacles and concerns there.
Yeah. Okay, take us to day 1.
Yeah.
So, January 21st.
So I'm going to ask you to pull up on the stage here just one shot. This is January 21st. This is me leaving Amicalola Lodge at mile -8. That is everything that my life will be for the next 153 days. So I am excited. My partner is taking this picture. She was down there wishing me well and seeing me off. That's about 26, 27 pounds of gear, and that includes food and water in there. And there was a lot of feelings going on at this time. A lot of, I would say, microcosm and macrocosm feelings, or a lot of very acute ones and very existential ones. It's very hard to explain everything that's going on in this picture. A couple examples. I'm looking back at the camera here, and I walked away. Just a few minutes later, and I remember looking back again, thinking for some reason that she was still going to be there, or that I was going to come out to a road crossing and there'd be a car to pick me up or something. I still felt like this is a day hike, right? I'm just out exploring. What's more, I was seeing. Now, this was January, but it was warm enough, at least at this elevation, 35, 40 degrees. People were still kind of exploring, milling about. This is a popular place for Georgians to explore and appreciate nature. People were walking by me, and I talked to a few of them, but I just remember thinking, they're all going to be leaving and going home in their cars to their houses and this heat and utilities. And I'm out here and I'm walking one direction, and there is nobody else walking in that direction with me today. And
Mm.
it was a very strange feeling to sit across or walk past someone and see we are in very, very different places today.
Mm.
And there was, again, as a January start, on the registry, there's an online registry where through hikers will register their start dates. There were 6 people who started on my day, at least on the registry in theory. I met one of them this day and I never met another again. And it's very likely that people start in think they're going to start in January and they register for it, and then real life happens and other reasons. There couldn't have been more than 20 to 30 people who truly started in January, at least by my experience and who I met. So we are talking 99% of these 2,200 miles were alone. And
Mm.
this was not what I was expecting at this time. I knew it would be quiet, and I deliberately started in January because I wanted it to be quiet. It was
Mm.
exceptionally quiet. So a lot of feelings going on that day, and we did not have too much planned. I said, look, I'm going to make it to these places. Here are the shelters. The first few days I'm going to stay at, but at the end of the day, I had my Garmin. I said, I will send you the text that says I'm okay, and I will reach out to you when I have cell phone signals and check in. But at the end of the day, you can't plan and say, by day 5, I'll be here. By day
Right.
10, I'll be here. By day 100, it doesn't. Through hikes don't work that way.
Yeah. Going into it with that mentality, I imagine was helpful.
It's a balance of how much can I plan, usually no more than 5 days out, with I just got to wait and see what happens step by step.
Yeah. So how long did it take into the hike for it to feel real, or for that feeling to subside and this is the new norm?
Well, like I mentioned, I started at mile -8. So first of all, I'm sitting there, or rather walking there and saying, man, I'm still in the negatives. So it didn't feel real until I got to mile 0 at the plaque, first of all. Now, again, I mentioned I did a lot of running. I was running 15 to 20 miles comfortably a few times
Mm.
a week. So I had good running legs. So actually, in my first day, it was a 16-mile day. This is probably double what an average unexperienced through hiker is going to do. They're usually at the 8-mile mark, if anything.
Okay.
So I felt good. And that was, I think, yet another moment. And there are many moments in the hike where you say to yourself, this is more real. This is more real. I might be able to actually do this, right? Every single time you're getting a little bit more confident. So across the 0 mark, that's a confidence point, right? I get to my shelter. That's a confidence point. I set up my sleeping bag, and I'm still so paranoid, by the way, of mice
I
getting into
bet.
my getting into my stuff. I remember taking my ground sheet, which is just a tarp you lay on to prevent from sharp things and dirt and things getting in your sleeping bag. You just lay on a tarp. I kind of took the tarp and tried to fold it over my sleeping bag bottom, not because I was cold, just because if anything climbs on that, it makes a lot of noise, that tarp noise. And then I got more comfortable with that. And I stopped having to wrap a tarp around me because I realized, like, okay, look, I could handle things. If my sleeping bag gets punctured, I do have little patching kits. I've done this before. I know what it's like. Additionally, I got more confident handling my gear. I knew I'm not going to leave crumbs all over, so the mice won't be attracted to anything in my sleeping bag. Eventually, I met a southbound through hiker who mentioned pro tip for any potential through hikers: mouse traps. The old wooden snap traps carry 1 or 2. They're very light. Now, I like mice. I like animals. Mice are cute, okay? But unfortunately, you have to deal with mice before they deal your through hike right out the door,
Mhm.
right? By
Mhm.
ruining your gear. And so that was yet another confidence point of like, I met someone on the trail. They gave me some great advice. I'm handling it now and doing it. And every little moment, you have a little bit more confidence, a little bit more control, to the point in which you cross, mile 1,000 and then mile 2,000. And at that point, you are so relaxed, you feel more normal outside with your house on your back than you do in a hotel.
Wow.
So it is truly an accumulation of little wins that make you feel it's real. The other stuff doesn't feel real. So it isn't so much one point, but simply an accumulation of moments.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think in season 1, I talked with people who were out there living their purpose. And one of the things I learned is, just do something every day. Do one thing that gets you closer to what you're trying to become. And in doing that one thing every day, you're getting confidence, you're building. There's not a big transition point. It is the little things every day.
And that's exactly what it was. It was an accumulation of one step after another. And then you talk about purpose. There is no clearer purpose on the trail. Okay, it is 2,198.4 miles from where you started. And every 100 feet or so is a white blaze painted on the tree. There is a clear path carved out. There are some bumps. There are several places where you might find yourself on your hands and knees, but the path is still clear. So the purpose, you get up and walk in its simplest form. No
Mhm.
emails, no text messages, no appointments, no nothing. Okay. You get up, you put your house on your back, and you just walk. From that sense, the purpose is crystal clear. And it's simply the accumulation of step after step that gets you there. It is very different than putting it on a poster, but boy, that statement was in my mind the whole way.
There's something that tells me it is so hard too. Was it ever hard? Like, the days like, I don't
Yeah,
know if I can do this.
there's a lot of those days. Now, when you plan for this through hike, there is physical planning, there is financial planning, there is gear planning, and most importantly, there's psychological planning. And one of the most important parts of the psychological planning for me was remember your whys. And a lot of people will forget that. Why am I out here? Okay. And in my case, it's what did I give up to be out here?
Mm.
Okay. I gave up time with loved ones. I gave up a job and a salary and benefits because this goal meant that much to me. And there are times, and were times for me, where I had to sit down on the trail and talk to myself
Mm.
about those points out loud to
Mhm.
say, all right, are you going to, your knee hurts. You only did 8 miles. You were supposed to do 12 miles. You fell down and there was literally nothing you could have possibly tripped over. You are frustrated beyond belief. There was a time in the Smokies I had to spike up ice spikes. They slip over your boot and they grab into the ice for 25 miles. The spikes are great, but they are real tough to have on your shoes for an extended period of time.
Miles,
They
wow.
really beat up your feet. Yeah, 25 miles over 2 days. I didn't take the spikes off. So these types of things, you have to sit down and you say, like, I'm out here because I gave
Mhm.
up X and Y and Z, and those are big deals. Okay.
Yeah,
And I care about this that much. So am I really ready to say, my knee hurts, my this, my that? Can I really do this? Like, man, I like, am I ever gonna finish this? All these thoughts creep back into your head, and you put your back against your whys. And that was a critical part of the psychological planning for me. So plenty of bad days. And remember, a lot of people start March and April. One back that I didn't have were people. Okay. They call it a tramley. Okay. Your trail family. You meet people in March and April and say, like, I like these people. I get along with them. We hike at the same pace, this and that. And like, you get that mental boost from
right,
people just being around you and be like, hey, you can make it. You can do this. Let's all do it together. There's a lot of camaraderie there. I didn't have that, right? Which became that much more important for my whys.
right. Did you go into it anticipating the psychological side of it, and did you plan for that
I did.
beforehand?
I knew it was coming. Now, like I said, it was quieter than I thought, but not in such a way that I was entirely bowled over.
Mhm.
Now, a big way that I planned for this was running. As I mentioned, 15 to 20 miles confidently, comfortably. That's hours of running. And I
Right,
didn't have a running partner or anything like it. Okay. That's hours in your head where your body's just moving and you got to find something to do in your mind. And whether that's talk out loud or listen to music or what have you. So I had extensive, and we're talking, thousands of miles of running over the last 2 or 3 years that I had been training for this. I was comfortable psychologically from that sense to be like, all right, I am going to talk to myself. If somebody does come around the corner, it's going to look a bit weird. And as I progressed, by the way, and the beard got longer and so forth, you really look weird. I knew what I had signed up for. I knew I was going to be alone. I was comfortable with my gear. And yep, there's still a level of inherent risk there
mhm,
but what if, what if, what if? Okay, well, what if I have my gear? I know it's warm enough down to negative temperatures, which would be unusual, even in the Smokies, to get that low. I have my Garmin for an emergency. I have food. I always kept my water, probably too much water, debatably, but whatever it took to make me comfortable to know that in the worst of the worst situations, barring a freak accident, which, yep, could always happen, but that's called inherent risk, that
Mhm.
I could be as prepared as possible.
Did your whys evolve or grow while you were out there?
I think a little bit, yeah. The easiest example is just the miles started getting less. Okay.
Mm.
And at some point, I remember I called my old boss from a couple jobs ago around mile 700 or so, which was into Virginia. And he said, "You're going to do this. You've put in 700 miles now. You're going to get to the end of this." So I think purely from just a mile perspective, that first piece comes to mind is like, okay, why? Because I've done 700 of it already. So I'm going to do the next 10 and the next 20. The second why is a little bit deeper, I think. There is a type of connection that, more eloquent people will describe a lot better, but there is a degree of simplicity, a degree of comfort that you achieve after a month or two
Mhm.
months out there where it's a peace of mind, perhaps it's a state of being, perhaps it's a psychological state of being where you just feel like essentially runner's high. Your poles are moving in the right way. Your body feels good. Your mind feels good, and you just feel like you could go, and you're operating like a machine. There were highs that were achieved like that on the hike that I will never achieve anywhere else in my life, even if I am running, even if I am working. And so there is a certain degree of intangible accomplishment, achievement, and comfort that you attain on the trail that does become a
Yeah.
little bit of a why to say, I feel something different out here, and I want to continue trying to feel that as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So I imagine the person that starts this is not the same as the person that ends.
you're absolutely right in more ways than one. Now, here is the physical change that I experienced. On the left is that day one for me,
Okay. Wow.
and on the right is both the bearded and shaved version, showing the weight loss, the change in hair, the gaunt look. And so, who I was and who I became physically was, I would say, about 40 pounds was lost. And weight loss on the trail for anyone can become a very serious issue. So, you really got to watch your weight loss
Mm.
because you are permanently operating on a calorie deficit. Shown here is a good 4 or 5 inches of beard that's all curled up. And again, 40 pounds different. So,
Wow.
you look at yourself, and sometimes it's hard to recognize yourself at all. Now, we talk about the mental side as well. You realize after the hike, you're going to see things a lot differently. You're going to approach challenges differently. I said that marathon, not a sprint thing. What that really means is you might have a clearer vision in a longer distance than you previously had. And you will have a little bit more confidence in knowing that if that vision is in fact that clear, that every little step will get you there. So
Mhm.
you take that, you apply it to long term work projects, you apply it to vision boarding, and you realize you stress out a little bit less if a step or two is lost along the way than you normally would have. Even deadlines and so forth,
Mm.
you feel like you have a bit more control over it because you said, if I can walk 2,200 miles, okay,
Right.
I can plan for X, I can plan for Y, I can control this, right? So I think the way you anticipate challenges is a big win coming off
Yeah.
the hike for sure. Now there are some drawbacks as well. Most of the time, people will go back to their lives. There were people I met on the trail who did not, and they said, you know what, this is for me. There were people who got all the way to Katahdin, 2,200 miles, and they turned around.
Wow.
And it put it into perspective to see someone who said, you know what, I don't want to go back to society. And for whatever reasons there were, I just want to keep hiking. And that was fascinating to see. Now, reason I bring that up is some of the drawbacks. You have that feeling too when you go back to work And you do
Mm.
question, should I have stayed out there? Should I have been those people? You get a kind of thousand-yard stare
Really?
when you're
Yeah.
looking at a project and a PowerPoint or an offer letter. You're looking at retirement funds and trying to manage things, and you just sort of go off, and you're like, there was a day where, a Motel 6 felt like a Four Seasons, and I was happy just to sit in a shelter in a sleeping bag and make my breakfast out of a can of water that I pulled from the river and treated. Always treat your water, and some oatmeal packets, and that was just a simpler time. So trail depression is a real thing, but you have to make a conscious effort. The hike doesn't end when you hit Katahdin. You have to make a conscious effort to take the positive lessons you've learned and apply them to your work,
Yeah.
wherever you can.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and what I heard there is your view changed
Yeah.
from going in to where you came out. Things got put in a different perspective. And the reacclimation into the world. Now your norm is surrounded by nature. It's being in silence, in dark.
Mhm.
And then you come out of that and there's this reacclimation. Had you planned for that in the same way that you planned for the hike?
There wasn't much I could do for planning on that. I knew it would hit. I didn't know how hard it would hit. And remember, at the start of the hike, you're just taking it day by day. You cannot guarantee you'll finish, and statistically, you won't in
Right.
relation to the number of people who complete it versus who don't complete it. And so you have a very short term mindset as to getting through the next day. And then suddenly it's over, and you realize like you do have to adjust, and you did do it. And all that worry that you wouldn't do it was for naught. But at the time, that's all you could focus on. And so you have to let that kind of wash over you. In a way, you do distract yourself a little bit by saying things like, how am I going to put this on my resume? And it is on my resume at the very end. It's the very last bullet because I'm proud of it, right? And I have plenty of lessons that I have learned from it that I can apply and do apply to work. But thinking like, how am I going to put this on my resume, and just sending out the job applications and talking to people about it and so forth are all kind of different distractions from that thousand-yard stare kind of mindset that is going to come in one way or another. And so you do struggle a little bit to connect with some people
Mm.
as well. But I wish I had a better answer for it other than be prepared. Trail depression is real and it will hit you.
Yeah. So what's next?
What's next, right? Well, it's a great question. I ask myself a lot, and I ask others too, what is your hike? What are you working towards in that long term where your excuses will come and go, but at the end of the day, it's inevitable. I try to live as many miniature lives as I can while still maintaining a degree of responsible and measured approaches to it. And so I have a few different hikes going on, and I'm working through a biography of each US president in order. Okay, and I'm
Mm.
up to Martin Van Buren, and spoiler, it is a dry read. It is a difficult one, right? But that's the type of stuff that I enjoy taking on now to say, okay, I'm going to
Mhm.
make it through all these books. I recently built my own computer. It was another kind of something I always wanted to do, a whole desktop computer and all the lights and everything and all the, bells and whistles. And so I try to always have another hike that I'm working towards, because in a way I've sort of established this a little bit of an addiction to the journey that I was on with the hike, the multi-year journey, to say like, keep doing that, keep
Right.
doing that. And that feels in a way like achieving a better purpose than I had before the hike, which is really the romanticization of the journey that I have been on. And it is romanticizing because there was lots of difficult parts of the hike and lots of parts I don't like to talk about, and the list goes on. But at the end of the day, it was the greatest personal achievement of my life. And I want to replicate that in whatever fashion that I can in my life going forward.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people who may be listening that going back to the intro that are like, I really always wanted to do this and I want to do this, but, insert all the excuses. What advice do you have for them?
Like I mentioned, talk to people, read books about it. Don't retaliate when someone pokes the bear. They're not saying, you're not doing it, are you? You're going to chicken out, aren't you? No. view someone else's interest in your passion or your vision as curiosity and embrace it and use it as a way to say, I want to be more accountable to this vision because I want or I see that others have a vested interest
Mhm.
in this plan. Micro steps, okay? Like I mentioned, I was on the trail. I made it real. I sat in an Appalachian Trail shelter and just experienced it, envisioned it. So take your end vision and chop it into those tiny little bits, okay? Even no matter how small they are, and go stand out there, hold it, view it, see someone else who's done it, talk to someone else who's done it. Whatever your proverbial hike is, what are the micro bits that you could break it into and actually tangibly experience to keep it
Yeah.
relevant? Those are some of my those are some of my thoughts there.
Love it. Anything else left unsaid?
I think we've covered it. I think that anybody thinking about this hike, I hope you embrace it. And I hope that my hike has inspired others to dust it off. Whatever goal, whatever vision was your hike, I hope that this inspires you to get back at it, keep it relevant, and get out there one day and take the first step.
Awesome. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
You can find me, Nicholas Lawrence, on LinkedIn, would be the most easy way to reach me.
Love it. And I will drop that information in the show notes for anyone who's interested. Nicholas, thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your story, and for inspiring us to find our hike and to hike our hike every day.
Love it. Thank you very much, Leslie.
As I reflect on this conversation with Nicholas, there are two things that stand out. The first is that excuses are always going to be there. There will always be a reason to wait. There will always be a reason to push something off to someday. But what Nicholas shows us is that if we don't let delays turn into doubt, if we continue to believe that we will do that thing one day, and we keep taking small steps in that direction, eventually someday becomes today. And second, no matter what it is, we all need something that lights us up, something that feels equal parts exciting and a little bit daunting, something that challenges us, stretches us, calls us forward. For Nicholas, it was his through hike, but as he talks about, he always wants to have a through hike. And I love how he talked about poking the bear, that idea of nudging the thing within yourself and allowing others to nudge it too. When we do that, we start to test the idea. We start to get closer to it. We let it grow just enough that eventually we can't ignore the thing anymore. Nicholas, thank you for being on Purpose Project, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Keep listening to your rhythm and don't be afraid to nudge the thing that's been calling you. Purpose Project is brought to you for education and for entertainment purposes. This podcast is not intended to replace the advice that you would receive from a licensed therapist or doctor or any other qualified professional.